Preparation is the first step in our astrophotography process. It's where we decide if and when we can shoot, where we want to shoot, with what we want to shoot with, and how we exactly compose our picture. If you have not done that yet, I would recommend that you first watch my video Astrophotography 101, a high-level workflow overview. It helps for context. And now, let's dive right into it. This is View into Space. I'm Sascha from Switzerland, so grüezi miteinander, and thanks for watching my channel. So preparation is the step which can be done anytime before we really start the shooting. It is the phase where we check when we can shoot, where we want to go, what we want to shoot, and that we really compose a nice picture in our mind so that we really know how the end result should look like. So the first thing we have to figure out is when we can shoot. And besides our personal schedule, this is the weather which determines that. Now thankfully for that we have a wealth of apps who helps us with that decision. The first one I want to present to you is Clear Outside. It is probably by far the most popular astro weather app. Now it really gives you a wealth of information about different cloud layers and so on, fog. And people sometimes ask, so how should we interpret that? And my answer is you only need to look at one line and one line only. And that's this one where there's stated time. The rule is very easy. If the color code on this line is anything different than green, forget about it. And if it's green, you're good to go. The other app that does practically the same is Xisteria. It doesn't show you that much information, but it's actually quite an intuitive and nice UI. And some people even say that Xisteria is a little bit more accurate. I personally use both to kind of validate each other. Now these apps really show the astro weather forecast. If you're really only interested what the weather will be tonight, then SkyLife might be a good option. And it shows you beautifully what the weather will be tonight in a percentage. And now to narrow the time frame even more down, you should have an app which actually shows you if there's any rain expected within the next few hours. And here I can recommend Rain Alarm as an example, but there are tons of it. Now with these apps in hand, you should have an easy play to figure out when the big moment is and you can do your next shot. If you want to have more details on these and other weather apps, I created a dedicated video for that. With that, let's go to our next step, and that's deciding on the location you want to shoot. Now the first thing you have to decide is, do I want to stay here at my house, my front yard, my terrace, or do I want to go somewhere dark or somewhere where we can meet other astrophotographers? If you decide to stick at your house, actually you're finished here and you can go to the next step. But if you want to go away, there's a ton of things to consider. The first thing to consider is, where are these places with a dark sky? And for that we have an app, as always, Light Pollution Map. There's also a website which shows you exactly the same. It shows you nicely on one side the light pollution, but on the other side also the light emitted from the ground. And with these two factors you can figure out your perfect dark spot. Also here, if you want to know more about light pollution, I created a separate video which shows you in depth how to look for these perfect spots. Now the other thing you might consider is that you want to meet some other stargazers, some other astrophotographers. And even there's some apps for that. On one side there's the app Meet Stargazers. That's an app where stargazers recommend places to others, and you can see that in the map. Now this doesn't guarantee that anybody's there, but at least you know that's a good accessible place with unobstructed views where you can set up your rig. The other app which tries to do the same is Scope Nights. They have a lot of potential, but I feel they're not there yet. There's a lot of technical issues and a lot of bugs in the app. And there's just not enough dark sites marked that it would be worth spending the $5. But keep it on the radar. But the ultimate best thing when you really want to meet some stargazers is simply going to Google and enter Star Party and your region, and you will be quite amazed what you're seeing. This here, for example, is a star party which will be happening in August here in Switzerland. I will definitely go there. Now the next step is probably the most exciting one, and it's choosing your object. You know now when you want to shoot, which also means how many hours you will have available for shooting, and also where you will shoot from, which means you know the light pollution. So it's a great moment now to choose an object that matches to that. There's a million of apps out there which could help you with that. As examples to show you now, I chose 2 PC and Mac softwares, one app for iOS and Android, and one internet homepage. Let's go now to the computer and try it out. So, welcome to my computer. We start with Starry Night 8, so a desktop computer planetarium. And what you will see when we go now through this software, but also the other ones, that there are different ways how you can actually look for your objects. In Starry Night 8, for example, and also in Stellarium, you don't really have any best-of lists. So you have to look for yourself what you want to shoot. And you look more also from a direction point of view. As you can see here, this green line, that's my horizon. That's where the telescope is standing. There's a view that I have, and this huge thing is actually my house, which is obstructing the view to the north-northeast. So I know my general direction where I want to shoot is from the east to the west. So the issue is that it's daylight at the moment, so we better make that it's night. So now it's beautiful night, so we can start looking out for what we want to shoot. For that, let's open some observation lists. I have a list where I have already some objects I want to shoot, but I can, for example, also look at the messy objects. I say select all. It's always a good target. And now you see that they are actually appearing. So now let's look around. Ring Nebula sounds interesting. Transit is at 12:30 in the morning, so that should be great. So let's have a look. We're centering, and then we're magnifying. So let's go closer to it. Yeah, why not? Looks very nice. That could be something to shoot, couldn't it? And it fits nicely in my telescope, so no issue there. So good choice. If I want, I can also go back and see if something else would be interesting here. M56, what's that? Star cluster, nice tool, let's look at that too. Transit at 2 o'clock in the morning, seems also to be good. Magnitude of 9. Why not? We could also do that. So you get the gist. It's really about window shopping. It's just looking around and figuring out what you want to shoot. And obviously, as I always say, what I really like about Starry Night, it's just a beautiful experience working with it. If you want to know more about Starry Night 8, I made a video about it. Now let's go to the next software, which is Stellarium. Stellarium is also a desktop planetarium software. The big difference is it's free. So here we already have nighttime, and I think you realize the difference immediately. It's just not as beautiful as Starry Night 8. But not as beautiful does not mean less useful for our search for an object, to be clear. So it does a very good job. For example, you see here that it nicely shows these nebula, and it's actually even smoother from a scrolling perspective. And you see here, for example, the Eagle Nebula. I can also click on it. I also get a wealth of information about the object. So I have a similar functionality, and sometimes the functionality is even better, for example, that it can hand over the coordinates directly to Nina. Now let's jump now to an iPhone app, and that's Sky Safari. It offers us 2 different ways of looking for an object. Yes, I can do the same. I can just with the finger scroll over the sky as I did on the desktop planetarium softwares. What I have here too is the compass. And the great part here is that I now move my phone and I can just actually move it to where I want to look at. And so it gives me a whole new way of actually looking at objects. And again, I have here frames of my telescope so I see immediately what fits in and what doesn't really fit in. The other thing that I have actually in Sky Safari, which is completely crazy that you don't have it in Starry Night, because they're both done from the same company, is when you go in search and I say tonight's best. And here I have a whole list of great objects for this night. So it's like a menu, and I can also sort it by magnitude or by transit time, and it gives me this nice list. Now, as a trick, if you have also Starry Night 8, what you can do now, you can click here on Make into Observing List. It created now an observing list with the same name, Tonight's Best, and this will sync with Starry Night 8. And now you have the same list also in Starry Night, and you could look there at all of Tonight's Best. Last but not least, I have a website for you, and it's called Telescopios. If you do not know it yet, it's an absolutely must-see. It looks chaotic at the start, but if I go to Targets, Deep Sky, I can now really plan my night. So I tell it, for example, that the object should be visible from 11 p.m. to 2:30 in the morning at least. It should be for 2 hours at least over 30 degrees height. I did limit the apparent magnitude to a minimum of 12, and that's the result. And I see already the nice pictures. I see a curve with here the nighttime, how high it is on the horizon and when it transitions. So it gives me a lot of information. When I'm interested in something, for example this cluster, I click on it, I get a nice picture of it, and I also get here a framing assistant, so I see how it would actually look like in my telescope. So that helps me already now to have an idea if it fits or not. So now we know what we shoot and where we shoot it from. And this will help us to choose our equipment. The first consideration you will have to make is which telescope to choose. And if you have only one, like I have, no problem at all. If you have more than one, there are different things to consider. On one side, obviously, if you shoot a huge nebula, you will use a wide angle, probably a refractor. But if you're choosing a small galaxy or star cluster, you're probably better off with a high focal length reflector. But the other thing to consider is that if you chose to go somewhere, you probably take rather your light portable telescope and not your huge Schmidt-Cassegrain. The second thing you should consider is the filter. And just as a side note here, in all of these process videos, I do only talk about OSC cameras, so one-shot color cameras. There are also monochrome cameras, which only shoot in black and white in principle, where you need a lot of filters, but this would just get too complicated to also cover that here. But also for color cameras, we might use filters. And if you decided to go to a place where it's completely dark, you might not need a filter at all. But if you're staying in a light polluted area, it really depends on the object. If you chose a galaxy or a star cluster, you will only use a light pollution filter. But if you chose to shoot a nebula, then you might use a narrow band filter. Last but not least, if we choose to go away somewhere, we have to get our mobile equipment ready, which means loading the battery, getting all the cables and the internet accessibility and so on ready to take with us. And we might also already pack our equipment so that we have everything ready. Now the last thing we should talk about is something more artistic. And it might make all the difference if at the very end you have a good photo or a great photo. Let's look, for example, at this photo, which I did rather early on in the hobby. In principle, it's not a bad photo. Technically speaking, it shows everything there is. But the issue is that it has so much black in there that it's not really attractive. And that's really about a question how it's composed, how it's framed, how much you zoom in. So it makes a lot of sense, first of all, with software to frame it, to zoom it, so that you have the perfect angle. And on the other side, it might also make a lot of sense to go in Instagram and to look how other people actually shot this object. What framing they chose, how much exposures they did, what filters they used. You might learn so much out of it. But from a software point of view, let's go now back to the PC and let's look at Telescopios and Nina, how they can help you to frame your picture. Let's start here with Telescopios. Now let's assume I decide for shooting the elephant trunk. So let's go there. Beautiful, isn't it? But when I look at the picture now with my telescope, I see kind of an issue. You see, that's the elephant trunk here. And the nebula seems to be huge, much bigger than what my telescope can capture. And also here we have these bright stars. These bright stars might lead to flares, they will be overexposed, and so on. So actually getting them out of the picture might be a good thing. That would be, for example, a way how I could frame it, that it looks nice. Still some nice stars, but the big ones are out there. I have actually the main thing of the trunk, I have it in the picture, but I could also go to something a little bit more unusual, because I can also rotate this here. Let's say let's do it in a diagonal fashion. That it's not the everyday shot, and I do it like this. So that's, as I said, a little bit the artistic part, but it's important that we really think it through. It makes a difference. Now, but there's something else I can do. That is I can go here to the mosaic settings. And I say, you know what? I do a 2 by 2 mosaic with a 10% overlap. And now I can actually capture so much more of the elephant trunk nebula. With the elephant trunk right here in the middle. It looks like this part of the nebula is more interesting. So doing something like this. That would be nice. And the cool part is, when you look here, download CSV. So it already tells me where the 4 frames are to do the mosaic. I can download it. So now I can load this file right into Nina, and Nina knows then where to shoot the pictures. And with that, let's hop over to Nina and let's look how the framing assistant looks there. So here we are within Nina, in the Sky Atlas. So I can look here also for the elephant trunk nebula, and I can say set for framing assistant. And here we are. And personally, I think this is even a much more beautiful picture than what we have seen in Telescopios. So also here, I see how big my telescope is, and I can now frame it. I can zoom in if I want to, and I can find the most beautiful spot. I have, by the way, also here the possibility to create mosaics. So if I go here to targets, and I just say 2 panels to 2 panels, here we are. I can also frame it right here in the same way as I did before. And once I'm happy with it, I can just say that I add the target to the sequence, and I have everything ready for the evening. So now we're all prepared. So we can either drive now somewhere or wait impatiently at home until it's almost dark. And then we start with the setup, which I will cover in my next video. Until then, there's only one thing left for you to do. And that's to please subscribe to my channel and give me a like if you liked the video. See you soon, and clear skies.